folks. Welcome to the TFL Truck Satellite Studios, coming from you deep in the bowels of my house. Sorry, guys. We've had to make a lot of changes, but in some cases, change is a good thing because we now have the TFL Truck and Car podcast. This is great stuff because this allows us to answer your emails and talk about new and exciting topics. However, we can't get to all the emails, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to be answering a few of the TFL Truck emails that are somewhat connected, and I'm going to do it right here. So, let's get right to it. Now, first of all, I just wanted to say I hope you guys are staying healthy and safe out there and sane. We'll get through this together, right? All right, let's get right to it. This comes from Joey, and this is an email. And it's a great idea for a video. And I'm going to be passing this on to Andre shortly after making this video. I think it's just an awesome idea. For your Goldilocks series and future gas versus diesel comparisons, can you make a video taking the trucks to the shop to get an oil change? This would show viewers the comparison where it matters the most in their wallets. I think it would be awesome. And it would help people make a more informed decision when purchasing. I haven't seen anyone do that yet. It's a really good idea. I only asked because I purchased an F-250 diesel a couple of years back, and I had no idea about the cost of maintenance. I was totally blown away. I ended up trading it for a Power Wagon. Definitely worth it. And this comes from, once again, Joey Y. And Joey, this is an excellent question. First of all, yes, I think it's a great idea for a video, and Andre will know about this by the time you see this video. So I promise you that he is fully aware of it already. In fact, we have an F-250 with the 7.3-liter gas engine. So comparing that to the equivalent diesel engine, that would be a great idea. But it also brought something else to mind. Yes, you are absolutely right. Gas-engined trucks versus the equivalent diesels are far less expensive to buy and to maintain. You're absolutely right. However, judging by what you purchased, which is a Ram Power Wagon, as awesome as they are, they have a 10,350-pound maximum towing capability and a rather limited 1,510-pound payload capability. That's a maximum. Those sort of indicate to me that when you bought the Power Wagon, you were replacing a truck that you weren't towing with full time, as perhaps a professional would. Someone who's hauling, let's say, a horse trailer or other large equipment that they have to take over very long distances that are very heavy. The thing about diesels is that, they take so much out of so little. When you think about how much energy they get out of diesel fuel, you get tons of torque. They are much more efficient in terms of range and mileage. So, in terms of what you're buying, you're getting something that pays off if you're someone who actually was working long distance or trying to haul heavy objects to places, okay? So, in terms of the maintenance, you're absolutely right. They are so expensive to maintain. Let me give you a little example, a story. A long time ago, Andre had a Duramax diesel, Chevy Silverado 2500, if I recall. And he needed to replace some injectors. And it cost him thousands of dollars. Now, I did something similar, but it was with a Nissan 4-liter V6 gas engine. And it cost me hundreds of dollars. Big difference. I know they're completely different engines, but that's kind of the point. So, in terms of just something as simple as an oil change, the disparity is 15, 20, 30, 40, 50% difference. In some cases, even more. And another thing to keep in mind is that diesel mechanics, which they're not as easy to find as a regular mechanic, yeah, they're expensive too. So you got to keep all those things in mind. If you're doing it as a profession, that's one thing, but if it's something that you really don't need, then you may want to consider the long-term expense. So In terms of a video idea, I think that's a really clever one, and I'm going to pass that on to Andre. Let's move on to the next email. Actually, emails. These are kind of connected. So they're about towing and payload. I'll read you both questions, and you guys will see what I'm talking about in just a second here. Okay, now the first one comes from Brenner. It's an email, and it says, "Hey guys, love your videos. I drive myself crazy researching trucks. I have a 2016 Toyota Tundra Limited. Love the truck. Bulletproof. But I purchased a relatively small travel trailer which weighs 3,800 pounds dry. Tongue weight of 520 pounds." He says unloaded with gear. Okay. "What I've come to find after purchasing the travel trailer is that the Tundra really doesn't have much payload. It says 1,175 pounds on the door. And payload is a big limiting factor. And this travel trailer is probably too much weight once I load it up with the family and with gear. Safety with the family is extremely important to me. Any thoughts? I'm probably looking at getting an F-250, possibly an F-350 Lariat." And once again, this comes from Brenner. Well, Brenner, that is a hell of a good question, and it kind of ties into the next question we have as well. There are a few things to keep in mind. First of all, the F-250 that you're talking about, they have a payload that runs between 2,400 pounds all the way up to 4,323 pounds, and that'll solve your problem in terms of general payload. And then it's a question of whether or not you get the gas or diesel. And we have that 7.3 liter gas engine, and so far it's proven to be very, very good with towing. I don't know if you'll need a 3/4 ton truck, an F-350 or the equivalent. That's a really good question. But let's move into our next email because it ties into the one that you just sent. This one comes from Kevin. "Hey TFL, my wife's Civic lease is up in July, and I am researching for a new/used truck between 2016 and 2020. I want to trade the Civic in. I was thinking of going with a half-ton until we got the idea of getting a slide-in truck camper. The models I found range from 2,000 to 3,000 pounds dry. Yeah, they can be really heavy. I figured this put me into the 3/4 ton category. I'm looking at a double cab or a crew cab with a 6-foot bed option. What do you recommend looking into? What would be some good suggestions for maximizing my payload? Also," here's the big point, guys. "Also, how would towing a 3,000 pound boat complicate things with the camper? Appreciate it, and I've been watching for over a year. Keep up the good work. Kevin from South Carolina." Well, first of all, Kevin, thank you very much for the email. And as you can see, they kind of tie in together because we're talking about payload and we're talking about towing. Now, one of the things that both Andre and Mr. Truck have been talking about for years is you have to pay attention to both. A lot of people will go out and buy themselves a truck that can haul thousands and thousands of pounds, but their payload, for one reason or another, is minimized, and that can screw everything up when you overload the tongue weight. So you have to kind of keep that all in mind. For instance, if you're pulling something that has a 400 pound tongue weight and you only have a 1,500 pound payload capacity, well, suddenly you don't have as much payload, obviously, and you're going to overload everything if you put something heavy in there. Now, we're talking about things like a trailer and, wow, a 3,000 up to 3,000 pound camper. Now, one of the things you guys need to keep in mind is what neither person mentioned here in the emails is whether or not they're interested in getting a 4-wheel drive vehicle, because that'll actually lower, in most cases, your payload and your towing capability. Now, if we go back to the first email, that guy mentioned that he got himself a Power Wagon, which is a great truck, especially for off-roading, but with all that off-road gear, all of that armor, all that stuff underneath, it really does affect its payload and towing. If you're getting a truck, even a 3/4 ton truck that has off-road gear, 4-wheel drive and all that, it will lower those numbers, and you got to keep that in mind. Also, something as simple as getting larger wheels on a limited or a special edition, that can actually lower your towing ability and your payload. So you got to keep that in mind as well. Now, a couple things real quick. First of all, I do not recommend the Nissan Titan HD, XD. It just doesn't have the payload you're looking for. The big three do have trucks that'll sit in those categories. A 3/4 ton truck may be the way to go. In many cases, getting the smaller displacement diesel will handle both of your guys' problems in terms of capacity for towing, and then it's a question of payload, what you decide to load the truck up with. But in most cases, being able to handle up to 3,000 pounds shouldn't be much of a problem, but you have to make sure that you guys look at the option list so you know exactly what your payload capacity is, okay? So keep that in mind. Obviously, the Ford F-250, General Motors products, 2500 HD trucks, and of course the Ram heavy duties, all of them have that capacity. There is one other thing that for payload people, they do have helper springs out there, a variety of different types, everything from just an add-on leaf to airbags that can help you. I do recommend, though, that you look at the fine print when you use those. They can help, but they may actually cause some problems with everything from warranty to towing. So you got to make sure you read the fine print. All right, so I hope you guys, find what you're looking for. Once again, payload is so important, even with towing. Okay, so let's move on to our last one. Now, this is actually a pretty funny one. This comes from Facebook. And remember, we do have a Facebook and a Twitter presence and Instagram and all that. So this one's from Jim, who posted on Facebook. This is actually pretty good. I actually titled it, Leasing Ruins Things. This is the email or the Facebook post. I'm thinking leasing has gotten a majority of people used to driving much nicer vehicles than they can actually afford, and therefore have driven OEMs to add more and more content, which drives up the price even further. Another fine mess we've gotten ourselves into. Once again, that's Jim from Facebook. I love it. That's great. And Jim, I completely agree with you on so many levels. One of the things that the OEMs have been doing has been jacking up the price because a lot of people are not satisfied with getting the base model or lower level trim models. If you look at the trims that people are buying and leasing, it's usually the higher ones, mid to higher ones. So that's kind of a bummer. And yeah, leasing. Let's talk about leasing a little bit, shall we? We have a good friend named Moto Man who is so against leasing that if you tell him that you're leasing a truck, he will actually rip his clothes, throw it to the ground, and say, "You're dead to me." Jeez. I'm against leasing as well, but I'm not as extreme about it. Here's the issue. I look at leasing as a long-term rental, basically. Let me tell you a story real quick. A friend of mine who several years ago, he's a Marine, and he was stationed in Camp Lejeune, which is in North Carolina. So he had to go from California to North Carolina, and he decided that he was going to lease a vehicle for 2 years while he was there. And that made some sense. He didn't want to worry about anything. He wanted a good, reliable car. Okay, that was logical. Then he goes and leases himself a very expensive pickup truck and falls in love with it. Much more expensive vehicle. And over the course of 2 years, he spent over $5,000. And remember, this was years and years ago. This is over 2 decades ago. So that's a lot of dough, especially because he didn't have anything to show for it when he was done. Other than, because he paid everything off on time, his credit rating went up a little tiny bit. But that was it. He had no equity on anything that he didn't buy anything. Buying out a lease is extremely expensive, and in many cases, you're paying 20, 30, 40% more than the vehicle's actually worth to buy the lease. Well, in his case, he didn't do that. He just returned it, had nothing to really show for it. And here's the worst part. He comes back to California, and then he leases another really expensive truck. Why? Because he couldn't afford to buy a really nice truck that he was used to. He kind of got sucked into some weird vortex where he was constantly swirling around the leasing pool, and he would never own a truck. He finally had to bite the bullet years later. He returned the vehicle. He actually had to pay a penalty on it because he went a couple thousand miles over their mileage, which I think was 13 or 14,000 miles in a year. And then he finally broke down and bought himself an entry-level truck and worked his way back up from there. But he would have never had to have done that had he avoided this in the first place. Leasing can make sense for certain people, but it's under certain types of circumstances. I know that some people really do want a very nice car, and leasing is a very easy way to get into a nice vehicle for a short amount of time. But you have to consider what happens at the end of it, because you have very little to show for it. Okay, guys, well, that does it for these emails. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys keep those emails coming. Keep those questions coming. Now, we will be answering a lot of these on our podcasts, but if they fall through the cracks, who knows? I might get my hands on them, or somebody else from TFL Truck. Once again, thank you guys for joining me. I really enjoyed this little segment, and I hope you guys are staying safe, secure, healthy, and hopefully sane. I'll see you guys next time.